I think we'll go ahead and get started now, Mason, if you're ready. Yeah. Hi,
Sounds
everybody.
great.
Again, thank you. This is Jack Stos with CyberSecOp. Today is one of a continuing number of webinars that we're presenting to our clients and prospective clients around services and outcomes that you're able to experience with CyberSecOp along with our partners. Generally, we have offerings in the virtual CISO arena, including programs that they can recommend and help you manage, vulnerability assessment, and other cybersecurity consulting services. Most notably, our incident response capabilities and our security operations center providing managed platforms to help protect our customers. So within the security operations center, we certainly have major platform partners, Rapid7, SentinelOne, and others. And today we're introducing you to Teramind. Mason Johnson here representing our partner to get into DLP or data leak protection as a service. And he'll be walking through the capabilities, use cases, and experiences they've shared with others. And at the end, we'll get into a bit of a Q&A. So please feel free to enter any questions you might have in the Q&A window. You should see that on your screens. And we'll come back to those later and get you your answers and get you on your way. So Mason, it's all yours. Take the floor.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you so much, Jack. Good afternoon, everyone, or morning, depending on where you might be calling in from. As Jack mentioned, my name is Mason Johnson, and I am the manager of our MSP and MSSP program here at Teramind. My job is essentially to support our partners like CyberSecOp to ensure that they have everything that they need to best support you, their customers, and provide you with the most valuable service offering possible. Now, today, our focus will be on probably the most valuable product line that we here at Teramind provide, and that really is the topic of data loss prevention. For so many enterprises, their data is one of their most valuable resources, and the consequences if that confidential data is exfiltrated, whether through internal negligence or malicious intent, could be, quite frankly, catastrophic. So, with that in mind, we will go ahead and touch on why having these data protection policies in place is important, what the process of implementing a DLP policy looks like from start to finish, and make sure to leave time at the end, like Jack mentioned, for any questions that might come up. So, let's go ahead and get started. Just a little bit about Teramind as the software vendor here. Teramind was founded over 11 years ago and has really worked with service providers such as CyberSecOp throughout the entirety of that time. We have partnerships with Oracle for data storage and hold a number of compliance certifications such as ISO 27001, SOC 2 Type 2, and more. Teramind relies very heavily on our partners to manage our product for their customers because although it was built to be highly intuitive, and in many ways it absolutely is, there is still a lot of work that goes into it on a weekly basis. Now, hopefully, this is really just monitoring the automations and reports that are in place to make sure that everything is running smoothly and there are no issues. But unfortunately, as you can imagine, there are definitely times when Teramind and CyberSecOp have blocked data exfiltration events, and an investigation needs to take place to see what exactly occurred. This, as well as getting everything properly set up in the first place, is exactly the value that CyberSecOp brings to the table. So, why is this important? Really, for every one of our clients, the answer to this might be a little bit different. A glaring example would be that for compliance reasons, an organization may be required to have stringent data loss prevention policies in place. That could be related to HIPAA for healthcare organizations or PCI for, well, anyone that deals with credit card transactions, or even CMMC for organizations that are doing work with government entities and would be considered a contractor or subcontractor. These are really just a few examples of why some compliances may dictate having data protection measures in place. Now, taking a step back and not considering compliance for a minute, there are still many reasons why this should probably be top of mind. Maybe cybersecurity insurance costs are getting out of hand, and by adding DLP measures, you're able to bring that cost down. Or another example we see quite often is with law firms. While there may not be a governing body proactively making sure that they enforce certain cybersecurity policies, the value in implementing DLP truly comes from making sure that they are responsible stewards, we'll say, for their clients' personal and confidential information. As you can imagine, a lot of information may come out through discovery that a client or a group might not necessarily want the world to know about. So, letting that information be exfiltrated when this could potentially have been prevented is, of course, an extremely bad look for the firm. And that example really applies to most other organizations as well. It might be worth thinking to yourself, how might your customers, supply chain partners, or anyone else that you might work with react if the data or other details regarding your transactions with them were released to the public or even put on the dark web, right? So for some, that thought alone might be reason enough to take a look at what you're currently doing to protect that data. All of this said, we run into organizations all too often that really don't have any type of data loss protection in place. And there really are some very understandable reasons for this. One reason is simply that it can be expensive, not only just purchasing a software for this, but then also actually managing it. The operational expenditure of having a team dedicated to this is often, makes it too difficult for many organizations to stomach. And that's where the term, as Jack mentioned, DLP as a service comes into play, and why, I would recommend you work with a partner like CyberSecOp to help drastically bring down that overall cost because they're implementing this for you. They're managing the policies for you. And then also, traditionally DLP can take a really long time to get set up properly, sometimes even months if you need something very complex in place. Now, that said, because Teramind has so much pre-built content, and on top of that, CyberSecOp has so many rules and policies that have been built over the years for other clients, that time frame for implementation and to have this up and running really is much, much quicker than the average. So, when most people think of cybersecurity and data protection, the conversation is usually around protecting the enterprise from external threats, right? The bad guy, we'll call it, is typically thought to be, a hacking group overseas that is going to brute force their way into your infrastructure via a vulnerability and gain root access to critical credentials that, then give them access to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And don't get me wrong, this is, of course, a very realistic scenario for which, any and every information security team needs to prepare and harden their environment for. But that said, the main threat facing the average organization is really going to be from internal staff. And as you can see here from these statistics, that international hacking group is really most often looking at the Fortune 500 companies, right? The big guys that they will get the biggest payout from. Not to say you don't need a SOC, firewall, proactive patching, and vulnerability management in place, because you absolutely do. In security, we preach defense in depth, right? And that's exactly what I'm talking about here. Because the one angle that you'll leave undefended is unfortunately probably the angle which will be leveraged against you. And so that angle that CyberSecOp closes down significantly, leveraging Teramind, is that data loss prevention piece to the puzzle. Whether through negligent employees that aren't trying to harm the organization or, simply have made a mistake, or if that employee is actually acting maliciously and truly is what most people would consider an insider threat, or also to the conversation earlier, in the unlikely chance that an external threat actor has gained root level access to an employee's device, having a solid DLP policy in place may just be the saving grace that blocks them from sending out sensitive data from that device in the process, even helping to alert that, there is an incident in the first place that needs to be taken a look at. So again, defense in depth, right? So this is where a user-centric DLP comes into play. One that can focus on data in motion and not only detect when confidential data is being sent or moved around the organization, but also block the exfiltration event from happening in the first place. So, in practice, what does this look like? Essentially, CyberSecOp would deploy the software to your employees' devices and then configure a set of rules that you would need to have running in the background. Again, this looks not only detect the data which is on the move, but also block it if you choose to set up those rules. Examples would be file uploads, whether that would be to the cloud or a thumb drive or anywhere else. But also look at data being copy and pasted to a clipboard, for example, or sent via email or instant message. And we're even looking at the attachments within those emails as well. And we can even take a look at the keystrokes to detect and block if employees are typing out confidential data that they really shouldn't be. So all really important and great features, but so far we're still missing a big piece to the puzzle. We can't always just block any and all uploads to the cloud, for example. It might be a routine job function for your employees to be doing so with certain documents, right? So rather, we do content inspection to ensure we are only flagging and blocking those uploads if certain data types are found via content inspection. For example, maybe we're only going to block that file upload to the cloud if it contains credit card numbers or personal identifiable health information or social security numbers, anything like that. We could also detect and block, say, if an employee is sending an email out with your customer lists, or maybe your source code or any other intellectual property. So many different forms that this detection and blocking can take place. And this is all customizable per your specific requirements. And then, really the last step here, once CyberSecOp has all of this configured for you, is to constantly monitor and do reporting based upon all of this. And on this slide here, we have some really great examples actually of custom reports that CyberSecOp has created for their clients with, obviously identifiable information redacted, of course, but this is where you can really leverage CyberSecOp's expertise to make sure that you are kept up to date on a significant alert that is coming through repeatedly, maybe potentially concerning trends. And then at the end of the day, see if there are any gaps or insights that maybe you weren't expecting. That way, so the CyberSecOp team can tweak those DLP rules that they have set up for you to ensure complete coverage and oversight over your data. So that's really what it looks like in a nutshell. But then, the next piece here that I'll discuss is a big differentiator for Teramind here when we talk about the service offering. And that really is the fact that on top of all of this data loss prevention, the blocking, the alerting, all of that, we're actually capturing screen recordings as well to go along with this. And this is really important, right? It adds context to, everything that happened during, we'll call a data exfiltration event. Again, was it just a mistake by an employee who, just didn't realize that they shouldn't send a specific piece of content? Or, was it something more malicious? Was an employee that we now know is leaving, were they sending out customer lists to themselves so that they can share that with their new employer? That could look like many different things. So this is your forensic evidence. So rather than just having the logs of what happened in the background on the computer, you have a real life recording of what actually happened on that computer screen that really anybody can understand, right? And this is important. If there happens to be a major data breach and, your organization goes to court over that, again, this is your forensic evidence. Or if you just need to speed up the investigation, or if you need something tangible for a cybersecurity insurance claim, again, this is something that could speed up that process, is having this tangible evidence of what happened on the computer screen. So one other important note here, because not everyone might want this, right? Although this is one of our more popular features in terms of data loss prevention, if you're not interested in this piece, the screen recording, you can simply have CyberSecOp turn this feature off, or even set it to only record the screen maybe 5 minutes before or 5 minutes after an alert is triggered if there was a data exfiltration event. So really a lot of customization available here, but definitely, a popular feature and very important just for adding that contextual evidence to exfiltration events. So, now how does this work for actual customers in action? I know CyberSecOp can speak to this as well, so feel free to reach out to them for any specific customer success stories that they have in, operating this for many of their clients. But here are just a few that I know of that really kind of hit this topic home. So the first is with a Fortune 500 bank customer of ours. They utilized many of the other data points that Teramind collects as well, but it all led to the same place. And that really is the protection of their data. Because they, a bank of enormous size, did not have good visibility or insights into who internally had access to what types of data. And then this led, unfortunately, to some of their bankers committing fraud by utilizing customer data over a number of years. So by implementing our DLP services, they immediately gained a much better understanding of how data was being handled internally, and they actually caught the employees who were responsible for this and prevented further fraud from those insider threat actors moving forward. And then the next one is, really a very similar story, but we have a very high profile agency in the public sector who was going through an audit. And similarly, as the last case, realized that they had no idea who had what access to what type of information. And the story goes that they were really caught by surprise by this and needed to get implemented something that would get a really good handle on things very quickly. So once this DLP policy was in place, as you can imagine, they quickly also realized that data was being very loosely transferred, both within and outside of the organization. So they were then able to quickly add in policies around the blocking of data exfiltration, gather incredibly valuable reporting around this, and eventually did make it through their audit. So another really good example of an organization that just didn't even really know they had a problem until it was too late, which is why I always recommend, trials of our service like this, right? Just to get a handle of where you're at and in terms of data in motion and what that looks like today. This should hopefully give you a really good idea if you need new policies in place to block something in order to safeguard your confidential data and that confidential data for your customers, right? So that's kind of the idea. That's what, DLP in a nutshell is, the value that a partner like CyberSecOp can bring to the table. Jack, I think this is a good time if we want to go ahead and turn it over and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, sure, Mason. Let me go ahead and restart my camera here.
Mhm.
Please confirm you can hear me okay.
Yes, I can.
Great. We do have a question. I know you touched on this briefly during the meat of the presentation, but could you maybe just describe a little bit more on the planning and planning, preparation, and timeline for implementation and delivery for new clients? That's our first question.
Yeah, absolutely. So this can really depend, right, on what exactly you're looking for. In terms of what data are you looking to safeguard? Is it credit card numbers, personal identifiable health information, addresses, customer lists, whatever that looks like, that is the first step to really identify what you're looking to protect. And then the process really can be very, very quick, right? CyberSecOp essentially just needs to deploy the software to your employees' computers. And then my recommendation might be to ingest data for a few days just to see, essentially what the data in motion looks like currently. This data set that you're looking to track, how much is it actually moving from person to person within or outside of the organization? And then from there, I think it should just take really a couple days to set up and configure some rules to block those data exfiltration events that you're looking to block. Um, it always might make a little sense to leave a day or two grace period to maybe test this out on some test computers, make sure that we're not getting a lot of false positives, anything like that. But you really can have a pretty good full-blown DLP policy in place within the week, I would say for sure.
So certainly days or weeks versus months, right, to get up and running and to get to value.
Exactly. Yep. And theoretically, if you wanted to cut out some of that testing and all of that, you could really have something up and running within a couple days, which may not be advisable, but it's always possible.
Sure. Second question. This is the customer asking. We currently use SharePoint with role-based access permissions to protect sensitive data. How would Teramind augment our current approach?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, essentially, Teramind is very customizable and flexible in the different things that we're able to do. So, we're able to block access to specific URLs, again, specific types of data that's looking to be exfiltrated. Um, so, it gets just very specific in terms of how exactly do we want to block that via the avenue that the employee is looking to send that information. So that would be my answer to that. It's just a little bit more granularity in terms of what exactly you're looking to block. And then also, of course, adding in those screen recordings for contextual evidence as far as what actually happened, what the employee was trying to do when they were sending that information would go a long ways that you would get on top of just, the SharePoint with RBAC solution you have in place today.
Gotcha. And it seems like email is central to all of this, just as an add-on.
Yeah, email is a big one. That I would say rivals file uploads to cloud, but typically email I see much more often with our customers. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I believe we're not just looking at the content of the emails, but we're inspecting the attachments as well. And we can get very granular and really into the nitty-gritty of what we're looking to inspect to see if it's worth blocking or not. And then again, gives you insights afterwards so that you can really fine tune these policies that CyberSecOp has in place to see if you need to make adjustments.
Great, thanks. That makes sense.
Mhm.
We do have one more. It's you've covered this earlier too as well, but they're asking for maybe another example or two of a client use case that exposed a previously unknown threat. Maybe something that wasn't in the slide deck.
Yeah. Um, let's see. I had a conversation a couple months ago with the owner of a financial advisory services firm. And essentially, very busy guy, a lot of employees working under him, but he brought up, hey, I'm glad that I had this DLP in place because I needed it myself, right? I'm very busy and someone emailed me and I thought that it was one of my clients and they asked for some of their financial data and I was about to send it out and I actually did click send. He clicked send on the email with confidential financial data on it, was blocked by Teramind. And then when the team looked into it, they saw that that was not the client. It was someone that was phishing him. And again, obviously, very intelligent guy, obviously was not malicious, but just made a mistake and didn't double check the email address and would have sent that information via email if they didn't have that DLP service in place. So a really good use case for why
Yeah,
maybe everybody needs this, right? Even if it's not actually a threat actor.
that's.
Um,
I was going to say that's a little scary and comforting all in one story. So thanks.
Exactly. Absolutely. And then just one more quick. Another case we were working on, I think Q4 of last year was an account, a pretty sizable account where someone was looking to exfiltrate data via a zip file. And they encrypted that zip file so that it was very difficult. And without Teramind, they really wouldn't have been able to get in to see what was going on inside of that zip file. But because we also offer keystroke monitoring, we were able to show the customer the password that the person had created for that zip file, and they were able to log into the zip file and realize that there was malicious intent there. There was a lot of sensitive data that they were looking to exfiltrate. So that's just another kind of out of the box use case, where kind of our other features really add up to combine and kind of put together a really valuable DLP offering.
Well, that's concerning too. But I think we're at or near time here at the bottom of the hour. Want to thank you, Mason, for a great presentation, and thank our guests for attending today. And we will be sending out a follow-up email to everybody concerned. So at that point, thank you. Thank you, Audrey, for hosting. Thanks again, Mason. We'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thank you.